press on. The exordium, in the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. Praise be to God, the Lord of the universe, the compassionate, the merciful, sovereign of the day of judgment. You alone we worship, and to you alone we turn for help. Guide us to the straight path, the path of those whom you have favored. None of those who have incurred your wrath, nor of those who have gone astray. So we hear things there, don't we? We hear things about the Day of Judgment. We hear things about Islam. We get some hints about those that have been predestined, those whom you have favored. We get some hints of a last judgment. So many of there are 6 faith statements in Islam, and I'll share them in just a second. Well, I can share them now. I believe in God. I believe in God's angels, His books, His prophet. I believe in the last judgment and the predestination of good and evil from God. Those are the 6 things you believe in Islam. I believe in God, His angels, His books, His prophet. I believe in the last judgment and the predestination of good and evil from God.
Do they have the devil as we do in the Christian?
Well, sure. I mean, we talked about that last week. Remember where Muhammad said that those satanic verses came because he was influenced by the devil?
But I mean, is it the same devil as we have?
Well, I can't speak for that. I don't know. Obviously, something that drives you away from God and gets you to do bad things. Yeah. So, the last thing, they believe in predestination, basically. God predestines. At the judgment, God requires an accounting from everyone. For everyone who is ungrateful for God's blessings, lives selfishly, and follows only his or her own wishes, the day of judgment will bring noise and clamor, and evil will be the morning. But for those who submit to God's will, He will lead them to the entrance of the home of peace. To them it is said, on the day of judgment, you shall be paid your full recompense, a goodly reward, yea, more than in measure. Well, that's kind of interesting, isn't it? You basically, you have a balance. You're weighed in the balance and found wanting. Now, the Bible has some of this image. We have a book of deeds, right? Now, we don't talk a lot about that because we tend to like the great stuff that Martin Luther pushed. But the Bible certainly has a book of deeds, doesn't it? We will be judged for our deeds. If you want the answer to this question, ask Glenn Nicomo after this session. He'll be glad to tell you, because he knows all the answers. No, but it's one of the images that we have in the Bible. And when we study Revelation someday, we can talk more about that. But it's certainly there. The tradition in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam about being judged for your deeds certainly is there and a part of those traditions. According to Islamic tradition, 2 angels will test the who have died with 3 questions. Who is your God? Of course you're going to say, Allah. Who is your prophet? Muhammad. And what is your faith? Yeah, Islam, or those things we mentioned earlier, those six statements we mentioned earlier. I believe in God, His angels, His books, His prophets. I believe in the last judgment and predestination. So that's what you say. And again, this is tradition. This is hadith. This is not in the Quran. For those who give the right answers, some other angel will make the wait for the day of judgment easier. Those who give the wrong answers will begin to suffer punishment while awaiting the resurrection. Everybody's going to go through a resurrection. They have to wait. Now, we can have a discussion about that, and when does the resurrection happen for Christians? We won't get into that today, but they have to wait for the resurrection to happen. Only those who die as martyrs in the faith or in some sort of holy war, jihad, go directly to paradise. Now, yes, you don't want to answer the questions about grace versus works. Okay.
What have you read in terms of, it seems that there is certainly free choice in the Quran in terms of I can live this life or I can live this other life. There is a choice. But what what did you find out in terms of the predestination part of their belief structure in terms of, they're not saying, the Quran is not saying that every Muslim is predestined at birth, one way or the other.
You know, that's in the margin of my thing. What is their understanding of predestination? I don't know the answer. I didn't take the time to look it up. Because you're a nice guy, I'll look that up for you. So.
Favorite, favorites.
All the rest of you have to work harder than he does. But that is a good question. I don't know the answer. I don't know. Does it say in there?
Well, what it says here, I don't know if that answers that question, but in the beliefs, of course, the last one is divine
Predestination. Yeah.
creative danger. But then just a minute farther down the page, all people have an equal opportunity to choose their own words and deeds, eternal life in the hellfire or paradise. Well, to me, those are not.
They seem mutually exclusive,
Right.
which they sound like in Christianity too. Yeah, I will do a little research on that and get back to you. All right, let's, I think it's interesting to wait. Now, there's a fierce battle going on today, of course. There's a lot of people today, suicide bombers, people that are radical jihadists that think they're going straight to paradise, right? And the fierce battle is this. The Quran is expressly forbidding of suicide and for one person to kill another, especially a Muslim, but really any person. And there is the need to justify a war, much like there would be in Christianity, and call something a just war, a holy war, that should be fought. And who gets to call a just war into existence, by the way? And certainly not Osama bin Laden in most Muslims' understanding. So we'll read more about that. We'll talk about that more down the road. But I think a lot of moderate scholars would say, no way are those folks going to paradise anytime soon, if ever.
Well, we did the same thing in the Middle Ages.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll talk about that too. The Crusades and other things are not shining examples, are they? The Quran uses images similar to those found in the Bible. Human activities are written down in books, and good and evil deeds are weighed on each other's scales. If you want to look some of this up, Revelation 20, verse 12. Revelation 20, verse 12. The ultimate goal is paradise. It is a place of peace and security with no rancor or toil. The most precious gift in paradise is God's nearness. Quite a few Muslims are convinced that hell will not be the end. I thought this was quite interesting. They point to God's power and mercy. We shall defer it only to its appointed hour. But when that day arrives, no man shall speak but his leave. Some shall be damned, and others shall be blessed. The damned shall be cast into the fire, where groaning and wailing. They shall abide as long as the heavens and earth endure. This is interesting, unless your Lord ordain otherwise. Maybe that could have something to do with predestination. Your Lord shall accomplish what he will. As for the blessed, they shall abide in paradise as long as the heavens and the earth endure, unless your Lord ordain otherwise. There shall be an endless recompense. The Islamic tradition includes an old hadith according to which a day comes in hell when the gates swing in the wind as in an abandoned house with no one left inside. That would be like universalism in Christianity, wouldn't it? Where everyone gets in ultimately according to the grace and mercy of God. Surah 55 is a song devoted in part to the rewards of heaven and refers to two kinds of every fruit: upholstered couches, palm trees, and pomegranates, and green pastures. You know, you live in the desert and tromp around enough in the desert. Green pastures probably sound pretty good, don't they? Probably no coincidence that Psalm 23 became such a favorite. Really. The Quran also says that the faithful will benefit from the attentions of huras, which many Western scholars translate as virgins, who have very white skin and very dark eyes. You know, it's interesting.
At least the Scandinavians out.
What's that?
That leaves the
Well, it
Scandinavians
does,
out.
doesn't it? You know, it's interesting, the promise of paradise is used today like you're waving a flag, isn't it? Come, fight for us. You can't, by the way, this is our version of heaven, and you can't get in our heaven unless you fight with us and are on our side, because this is God's side. And so it's like waving a flag in battle, and it is a rallying cry for so many people. And you look in places like Palestine, and every one of those persons has lost somebody that was an uncle or a brother or somebody, they died in some sort of conflict. And the idea was they comforted themselves by saying they went off to paradise. And when paradise is a lot better than the world you're living in now, it isn't too hard to make a case for fighting for our side and getting involved in this conflict. Again, we'll talk about that more down the road, but the promise of heaven, I think, has gotten way beyond what most conservative or moderate Muslim scholars would be comfortable with. It has been used and abused over and over again to get people to fight. And when the promise is you'll go straight to the seventh heaven and you'll get 70 virgins at your beck and call, and it'll be a life of leisure, then who wouldn't want to do that? Who wouldn't be willing to go down, strap those bombs around your chest and make something happen that they were asking you to do? You know. I want to talk briefly about the groups within Islam. We'll get the suicide bombers and Islamic radicals in the fourth section, fourth week. Excuse me. Groups within Islam. I said earlier last week that there's as much variety among groups in Islam as there is among groups in Christianity. We just don't know the nuances as much. But some of it started with the death of Muhammad. They had no rightful heir, nobody that had been assigned to be an heir, and so it led to the biggest split of all Sunnis and Shias, or Shiites. The Prophet's preference for him was to follow Ali, the husband of his daughter, Fatima, and the father of his only surviving grandsons, Hassan and Hussein. And while the family was busy burying the Prophet, the leaders in Medina elected the aging Abu Bakr, the father of the Prophet's favorite wife. He assumed the role of caliph. Caliph is the technical name for those that follow the Prophet. And there were 12 of them in all, and then they stopped counting. A minority of Muslims disagreed with his decision. They were convinced that God himself would determine Muhammad's successors, and that these successors must come from the Prophet's family. Thus they believed the caliph chosen by God was Ali, the son-in-law of Muhammad. He came to be known as the Shi'at Ali, the party of Ali, by the Sunnis. I think it was a term of derision. Eventually they would be called the Shiites. Okay? Now Ali was eventually appointed caliph. He was young, but a huge deal. He could have fought them, he could have disagreed violently, but he didn't. He went along with them, and eventually he did become caliph for 5 years. He was the fourth caliph. And it's interesting, I won't give you the names, you could certainly look it up if you wanted to, but of the first 4 caliphs, 3 of them were murdered. So this was not a great job description, and a lot of times they didn't live a real long time, and 2 of those people were murdered by Muslims. And again, expressly forbidden in the Quran for a Muslim to kill another Muslim. But it happened, it still happens today. Ali was eventually appointed, but was murdered in 661. His son Hussein was also murdered in 680, an event that is still commemorated by Shiite Muslims today, or Shia.